left, right.
Thank you for joining this episode of Sip Talk. This is a fun one, but it's pretty dark. We are talking some of the worst ways to die, and it's it's a topic we almost didn't want to do, but it was pretty interesting. So that's where some of the fun comes out of it. But obviously, when we're ranking the worst ways to die, really any way to die ultimately results in death. So they all are pretty lousy. And if you don't think that's a subject you might be up for listening to, then maybe you want to skip this episode. If that's the case, I'll see you next time. If you do commence, I'll see you on the other end. Adios. This is Sip Talk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Where's this going?
Cheers.
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 God damn, it feels good to be back on air. This is Sip Talk. My name is Justin DiGiulio, joined by James, the Bosnian Boswell of Charleston, South Carolina. James is a philosopher, a professional referee, a bartender, and most exciting of all, an accountant. James, how's it hanging down there in hot, sweaty South Carolina?
Dude, it has just been like not so hot today. Like I had to walk outside a couple times in the middle of the day, and it just feels like you're walking into an oven.
I remember living in South Carolina, and you drive around in air-conditioned cars, or you spend a lot of the time indoors. And then when you open those doors to go outside, although God forbid you open the doors of your car to get into a hot-ass car, you think it's hot up here in New York? When you open your car doors, down there, it's like another level of heat coming out of your car. Shit melts in your car. Shit to the
You want
parts
to talk about how hot it was in my car? I didn't have to go into my car or drive anywhere today, but I was curious to see how hot it was outside, and I got one of those infrared thermometers.
Oh, nice. We're gonna do a little Corona check on the car.
Yeah, and so I was just like shooting random things in the yard to see how hot they were. I was like, I wonder how hot my car is, and my dash was like 165.
Holy shit. That's pretty hot. That is definitely pretty hot. So look, today's episode is the worst ways to die. This is supposed to be a continuation of those tiny little things that really piss you off. And I was really
Yeah,
looking
we're
forward to
stepping
that.
it up a notch.
I think we'll have to return to those, but I think today we ought to get into the worst ways to die, because why not step it up a notch? We took a week off, we had a little hiatus, and now we are back full
Well,
force, ready to have a drink. I could use a drink. What are you drinking down there?
I am drinking. Who is this? Oh, Wicked Weed, Watermelon, Dragon Fruit Burst.
And that's a beer or a type of shock tarts or something? Some Skittles. I
It's
don't know candy names very well. I'm not.
it's a sour.
I
So it's a
see.
beer, but it's a sour, so it's
Well,
not
look,
going to taste a lot
I
like
got
regular beer.
I got two drinks before we start to get into death. I got one glass of ice cubes. Actually, it is National Bourbon Day. I was notified by several alcohol delivery apps, and I was recently gifted this Maker's Mark 46. I'm going to pour that into the glass, and then I got a little beer just to tide me over, so I don't drink too
You
much
should drink
bourbon.
2/3 of the bottle.
Well, that's usually what I do on these episodes, and try to avoid that a little bit tonight. I got about a third of a glass though, so that feels like a pretty healthy pour.
But yeah,
Let's
so like last episode, we started off by talking about like stepping in gum or having a bird shit on you. And so now we're talking about other things that could ruin your day, like
dying.
death.
Before we get there, though, just on this note, you're talking about this beer that you drink, and it's a sour beer.
Hmm.
I want to share with you kind of one of the worst things that something that could ruin your day. So on Sunday, I got up and I had to run to an open house in Queens. So I sat in traffic going out to Queens, and I had to be up in Albany to pick up my friend in Albany. He had won concert tickets at a distillery, and the distillery was it was an apple orchard, but they made ciders. They made hard ciders. So I drove from Queens up to Albany, and then I picked him up in Albany. We drove through pretty monsoon rain to get out there, but once we got out, it was like in Syracuse. Once we got out to Syracuse, the countryside of Syracuse, it was bright and sunny.
So we go to the concert. We get up to the gate, and he had won the tickets on the radio. So the tickets were waiting for him at will call. They took his information, obviously, over the radio. Well, off air, but the radio host. We get there, and they didn't have tickets for us.
Uh-oh.
At that point, I had spent about 7 hours in the car to make this happen. Either way, we got in. We were there for about 25 minutes. The rain caught up with us, and the concert got rained out.
Who was the band?
It was Guster. You know Guster?
Oh, yeah, I like Guster.
Yeah, nobody knows who Guster is. It's a great band.
Yeah.
Great band. But there was there wasn't sour beers, but there was a lot of ciders, and some of them were kind of sour beer-ish.
Yeah. Like, I think a dry and sour kind of cider would be like have a lot of overlap with some sour beers.
Yeah, and there was one there was a cider mixed with IPA, which was an interesting one. It was I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of cider. To me, it's like drinking like sparkling apple juice, and they're way too easy to drink, and I don't need anything easy to drink.
When I was in Spain, they had a kind of cider that they would make, and it's very different than the kind of cider you'd get in the States. Like, it's much
hard cider.
Yeah, a hard cider, but it's really dry and usually pretty sour, and it was really, really good. But like a lot of American ciders almost taste like candy to me.
Yeah, a lot of sweet stuff here in the U.S. So people like it sweet. A lot of huskier people here in the U.S. than there are in Spain as well. But look,
and Spain doesn't hold back when it comes to their treatment of fat people. I would play street soccer pretty regularly at a court about 3 blocks from where I lived, and there was a pretty regular group of people that would show up there. And one night I'm there, and most people are all pretty slim and athletic, but there's this one guy that's on the heavier side. Like, on Americans, by American standards, he'd probably be like overweight.
Yeah.
But like not obese. And all like I don't know what his name was because all they did was call him Gordo.
It's terrible.
That's just what they referred to him. Like, pasa me gordo. Pass it to me, Gordo. Fatty.
All right. Now that you're degrading overweight people. No, you're not. That's just,
I wasn't.
You're recanting a story. All right. So look, we got to get into the worst ways to die. I think
we can also talk about the best ways to die.
Well, well, how should we lead? I think we should lead with the more morbid stuff first. I think if somebody's listening to an episode titled "Worst,"
and then we brighten it up with best ways to die.
Yeah, I think that's I saw a guy on the side of the highway walking down the highway. I was going over a bridge. So the bridge was like 2 miles long, and he had a hard hat on, but there was no cars around. So I assumed he was on some type of official duty. But as I passed him, I was like, "Shit! I wonder if that guy is going to jump off a bridge today." And if so, why does he have a hard hat on?
He's probably like an engineer surveying the bridge.
Yeah, but he didn't look very engineer-like. He was kind of wearing not drabby clothes, but he wasn't wearing like a light-colored vest or anything. Either way. All right.
Life pro tip for anybody out there. If you want to get in someplace, just put on a high-vis vest. If you have a high-vis vest and a metal clipboard with just random rattling contents, people will let you in anywhere.
I'm here for the inspection. We don't have an inspection. Well, surprise inspection.
I'm not sure if you got the memo or not, but yeah, I'm supposed to be here. I'm scheduled for 10 o'clock. It's 10. I just need to get into that closet over there, and also the bank vault.
I heard about this guy that went to a fast food joint, and he put up like big cardboard cutouts, like life-size cardboard cutouts of himself. And they were there for like a month or so because he's like, yeah, we're here for the new campaign. We were told we have to set this one up, and they just let him set it up.
Oh, I got to share this one really quick since
we got to get into this.
No, it's completely off topic, but it's worth it.
All right.
So in England, there was a park, and there was a parking lot that had a little toll booth where you pay to park. $5 a day or something like that, right?
Parking lot, yeah.
Yeah. So the attendant for the parking booth showed up every single day, like 9 to 5, for like 27 years, and it was a city park. And eventually the guy just stopped showing up to work. So the people who ran the park called the city and said, "Hey, this is such and such park. The guy running the parking, like, he just didn't show up today. Like, he hasn't been here for like the whole week. Can you guys send somebody else out to run the booth?" And this city says, that's not a paid parking lot. We don't have anybody on the payroll that does that job.
This guy just retired from collecting people. That's a brilliant idea. I wish I had the time to do that. All right, look. So you got to lead with this. You got to lead. I mean,
There's a lot of good candidates, like the ones that everyone think of, and I'm gonna go with like immolation. Burning to death sounds really horrible.
Immolation is not. I actually just hovered over that word and clicked on it to figure out immolation. Interesting. And where does that generate from, aside from just doing it on your own or like a monk?
Well, I mean, anytime you burn to death, like self-immolation would be, like during the 70s. If anybody is familiar with Rage Against the Machine, their first album, the cover is a monk that's on fire, and there were, I think, 2 Tibetan monks that like poured gasoline on themselves and lit themselves on fire to protest the Vietnam War. But so that would be self-immolation. But like, if you're in a house fire, chances are you're not dying because you burned to death. You're probably dying from like smoke inhalation or suffocation.
Which is usually how that works, yeah.
But I think burning to death is like, I don't know. You ever been burned?
Yeah, I've been burned. It does not feel nice. I can't imagine doing it on purpose like a monk. That's some pretty serious shit.
Yeah, but even if you don't do it on purpose, if you think about the worst burn that you've ever had, that doesn't even touch on what burning to death would be like.
I think we should take turns here because I want to share with you this. Oh, come on! Now I lost my window here. The Spanish donkey. Are you familiar with the Spanish donkey?
No, but so I put down torture as a general, but there's definitely torture devices out there that sound really awful.
So I'm gonna share with you the Spanish donkey. Let me share the window here so it's live. The Spanish donkey it's almost like a what would you call it? The horse that you would ride in like gymnastics or something.
The pommel horse.
Yeah, pommel horse, but it's shaped in a V, right?
Yeah.
So, and what they do is where'd this one go with the girl here? And so they put you on this horse, and I mean, this is creepy, scary shit. And what they do is they tie weights to your feet, and they increase the weights to potentially sever you. Is that not freaky as shit?
Yeah, that one's really bad. I'm also thinking, I don't remember the name of it, but it was like a device where it's basically a giant metal tube that you're in, like a human-sized metal tube, and like they would heat this thing up to like, so it was glowing red, and then they would put you in it.
That sounds very difficult to get you in there.
Well, if your hands and feet are tied together because they're torturing you, probably a little easier.
So, so just on the Spanish horse thing, I read that it was a torture device for women, and I assume that probably had something to do with infidelity or something along those lines. And the instrument is called the chevalet, which is from the French diminutive of cheval, which means horse. We could have Rosh correct us on that one, but they put you on this effective triangular horse and then tie weights to your feet. That sounds terrible, even if you are just heavy. And they may not kill you on this, but it might be something that they would do to torture you, and then you could be seriously injured from this chevalet.
Oh, here's one. Keel hauling. Do you know this one?
No, I've never heard of this.
So this is a like pirate in old maritime punishment where you would have a rope that goes. So you've got the ship, and on one side of the ship is a guy standing about to walk the plank, basically, and on the other side of the ship is a rope, and it's taking you and dragging you across the bottom of the boat.
Oh, yeah. I've never heard of that, but that sounds pretty terrible.
And the thing is, if you think like because they think 1800s boats, so they're big and also like they've been in the water a long time, so they've got all sorts of barnacles and crap on the bottom.
Oh God, that was a way that they would torture people, or effectively just sentence them to death.
I think depending on, I don't know if it was always fatal, but it would be something. It was kind of like the worst punishment on the ship to enforce discipline. So if somebody like really screwed up, then they might be keel hauled.
Oh God. So I wanted to segue from Spanish donkey into quartered by horse.
That one's bad.
So the quartered by horse, basically, each of your limbs is tied off to a horse. So your wrists, both your ankles are tied to 4 different horses, and then I assume they're all slapped or something along these lines. So they go
they
running
just run off in
4 different
opposite
directions, and then you are left quartered. Now, I imagine in rare, I don't know if, can you search if anyone has ever survived being quartered by horse?
I don't think so.
It would really depend on where your body tears there. But and this is something they actually did.
Well,
I think back in the
it wasn't. The quartering might not even be the worst part of it, actually, because I'm looking at this, and yeah, it was a punishment for high treason in England, in like the 13 and 1400s, and it started where they would be like they were hanged almost to the point of death. Like they didn't want the hanging to kill you, and then you would be, and this is all while you're still alive, by the way, emasculated, then disemboweled. And
are
according
you
to
reading
this,
the Britannica article?
no, I'm reading the Wikipedia article.
Oh,
They're saying
okay.
that you would be beheaded, you would have your head chopped off, and then you would be quartered. So the quartering part you wouldn't experience. Your body would, but you wouldn't.
It's called drawn and quartered.
Yeah.
So I have England 1283, a crime for treason.
Have you heard of scaphism?
No, I have not.
So this is a Persian method, where they would tie the victim up between 2 boats. So think like 2 rowboats, and they would leave a little gap of air between the 2 rowboats, and then they would cover them with milk and honey, and then just leave them in the boat to attract like insects and vermin and stuff.
There's some really sinister shit out there, man. I don't even like thinking about this stuff. Honestly, I don't like watching horror movies. I don't like I don't need this shit rattling around in my brain, right? Like, it is not.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Where like I don't need movies to show me super graphical depictions of whatever is happening. Like, you can kind of let that happen off screen, and I'm fine to know that it happened, and it advances the plot however they want it to. But I don't need to see the gory details.
What I'm saying is, I don't even want to know about it. Like, my brain can go in some pretty rough places sometimes. I don't need the
like
I don't
on
need
that
the extra
topic,
ideas.
like being beheaded, because like with the guillotine, and this is something that like I think it would be almost impossible to investigate scientifically, but the thought is that after being beheaded, you're alive for about 10 seconds.
Yes. And I think they have tried to prove this. Some scientists went and he said he was going to blink a certain number of times after he was beheaded. But your brain and your eyeballs work independently from your lungs in the rest of your body. It's just that they need your lungs and your heart to circulate blood to keep them functioning.
Yeah, but apparently they can function for some very short amount of time afterwards.
Yeah, very short amount of time, but that does sound terrible. So look, so I mentioned the. So I have a segue here, man. I'm trying to build a direction here. I had the Spanish donkey, and then I went into the being drawn and quartered by horses, and now I have crushing. So crushing is death by placing heavy weight on you, and this was a common method of death through the South and Southeast Asia for over 4,000 years, and they were crushing people by elephants. So they're having an elephant step on someone effectively.
I had heard of the practice where like they just kind of tie you down to like a board, and then they put another board on top of you, and then they just start putting rocks on top of it.
So this was a punishment by law. I'm guessing probably somewhere in. Oh, it says French law. So it's French law where the method of torture, where they basically do that. They place heavier and heavier stones on top of you until you enter a plea. And it was usually for people who wouldn't talk. They wouldn't enter a plea in court. They wouldn't say anything to incriminate themselves. And they'd say, well, we're going to make you talk, you'll see. and they just keep putting weight on top of you until you finally say something, which if you hold out too long, it could be too late.
Yeah, for those of you who think the Fifth Amendment is a problem, like I present to you the alternative case.
Yeah, where you're forcing people to talk. That's very similar to like long ass interrogations where they're like 12, 18 hours long.
Yeah, that's bullshit. The practice where they just keep somebody in a room and like barely feed them, barely let them go to the bathroom, and just exhaust them to the point where like, what do you want me to say so I can just go home?
But also your brain's not working correctly. So like you
also true.
Yeah. Especially if you've had only a lot of coffee, like caffeine makes you go pretty.
Combine sleep deprivation with the caffeine overdose, and you can easily hallucinate.
That happened to me once.
Same here.
When I drove back from Colorado towards the very end.
Happened to me driving back from South Carolina to Albany.
That sounds terrible.
You were in the car.
Oh yeah? What was happening?
You were sleeping and I was hallucinating.
What were you hallucinating about? Oh, I think I remember this.
Yeah.
Okay, you fill me in though,
I was probably about 10 hours into the drive at this point.
Why was I not driving, or was your car?
It was my car, and I drove until I couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember like the last 2 hours or so, it's kind of the very early morning, so maybe like an hour or two before sunrise to like 6 to 6:30 in the morning, whenever the sun comes up. And I remember looking up at street signs, New York City, 100 miles, right? Mm-hmm. But like whatever I was thinking to keep myself awake, I was thinking like, I wonder what it would be like to own a horse. And so it would be like, I'd look up at the street sign and it would say own a horse, and then I'd blink again and it would say New York City 100 miles. And you know how when you're driving and like the opposing traffic causes like the posts in the middle and the median to cast shadows on your side of the road?
Yep.
I kept on thinking those are animals that were about to jump in front of the car.
I've had this, yeah.
And we finally got out to a gas station in New Jersey, and like I got out of the car and it was like I was drunk. Like I had no sense of balance.
That's what happened to me. Yeah, I collapsed in the parking lot when I was in a Walmart parking lot.
And yeah, like it was really hard for me to even just like walk into the convenience store to buy a drink. And then I get back into the car and it was almost like everything came back into focus. Like there's like this tunnel vision where you zero in on just one task. I was like, all right, if I wasn't able to like walk or form a sentence when I was outside of the car, just because I'm focused right now doesn't mean that I should be driving. And I had you take over and you drove like the last 3 hours home.
Oh, that's what I was going to say, is that you can have that good focus, but then what happens is once you get up to speed, you get kind of back in that groove, and the vibrations from the car and the lights and just driving fucking straight without much to think about or to do or to occupy your brain. That's when you lose it. That's why one of the things that I like when I do long road trips, and I didn't do this over the weekend when I was in the car for 10 hours in one day. I like pretzel rods because you can pop a pretzel in your mouth and you get the crunch. But if you like a pretzel rod, you can't stick a pretzel, long pretzel rod in your mouth. So you have to kind of be, using your hands to keep you occupied, and then also you get the crunch from the pretzel rod. And then
Gum.
well, gum is always good. I also like podcasts or talk radio, or even better, having someone having a conversation with you is
Yeah.
very helpful.
But if you're driving alone, you get tired. Like one thing that I learned pretty early on, but probably should have learned it earlier, is when you start to get tired, where like your eyes start to close and you feel like you're kind of nodding off or whatever, pull over as soon as you can and just like take 30 minutes, take 40 minutes, and just like sleep in the back of your car or something.
Or do that nap is I've had to do that on the motorcycle, or I was falling asleep in the motorcycle. I pulled over to like a text stop and just laid in the grass for like 12 minutes, and I just woke up and felt like a normal person again. But sometimes your brain just needs to. It's like the power cycle on your phone, or on your, like, right before we got in the podcast. I know every once in a while I using a little too much RAM, so right before we jumped on today, I reset my computer, and I was like, all right, we'll definitely be good.
Yeah.
But it's just something about being on for too long is not good, and that, I will tell you, has to be one of the worst ways. It did not make our list. I don't. Do we have car crash on here anywhere?
No. Um.
I think there's a lot worse ways to die, but car crash, especially after you've been struggling to stay awake, cannot be great.
Well, I mean, you might have because on one of the best ways to die, a few of them are kind of like dying in your sleep from various things. So I don't know, like if you fall asleep while driving, then a car crash is falling asleep, like dying while asleep.
Ooh, on that, I learned something. I learned something very interesting, and it was talking about 9/11. They're talking about being on an airplane, in an airplane traveling at roughly. So, how fast do you think the airplanes are traveling when they hit the World Trade Center?
Probably between 300 and 400 miles an hour.
Okay, so let's say 300 miles an hour. You're going to have to do some math here. At 300 miles an hour, how far do you travel in 1 minute?
Hang on. $440 feet per second.
That's what I was getting at. So 440 feet in a second.
Yep.
All right. What do you think the distance is from the nose of the airplane to seat 33A?
150 to 200 feet.
Okay, so if you're traveling, how many feet in a second?
440.
Okay, so if you're traveling 440 feet in a second, and in roughly half a second, your seat would be at the same place as the tip of the airplane.
Yep.
The majority of those people, before they were even consciously aware that the plane had made impact, were already smithereens. So the actual impact of that plane hitting the building, because you always think how terrifying that would be, but realistically, that happened in half a second.
I think
There's a lot of
the
terror leading
terrifying
up to it.
part is the minutes leading up to it, of knowing that the plane's been taken over and knowing that something terrible is going to happen and you're probably not going to survive.
Well,
Like the actual death is probably not that bad, but the moments leading up to it would have been.
But you also may not know that you were going. Yeah, there's a lot of terror in that, but you may not have known you're going to hit a building, right? You might have thought ultimately we're going to land, like we're being held captive
But,
on
like
this airplane.
as you're circling New York City and seeing the buildings, it would probably start to dawn on you.
Potentially, yeah. Although nothing like that had ever happened before, so it may not have been. You might have just thought, hey, they're holding us captive, circling us around New York City, so everybody can see us.
Well, I can think of the last time I was in Spain was 2015, and the day that I flew into Spain, there was a headline about a Lufthansa crash that actually, like, we flew over almost the exact same route that this plane crashed on.
Fuck.
And what it wasn't a mechanical failure. What it was is that one of the pilots had like severe depression that he didn't report to his employer, and like didn't like take psychological leave from the job. and like he locked himself in the cabin and just wouldn't let anybody else in and just flew the plane into the mountain.
Look, I said this, and
So think about like being a passenger on that and being like knowing that like, because people were trying to get into the cabin, like because there's always two pilots in the
hang
cabin.
on.
One of the pilots goes to the bathroom and he's like, "Hey man, let me back in."
Look, I've said this. I was on a rant for maybe a month or so a few months ago. We have lowered our standards, right? People don't want to come into the office. Well, like we'll let them run the company. We don't have to tell them to come in. People want this or they want that. We're not. We've really lowered our standards across so many different things. Now, and rather than pick the best candidate in many instances, we're filling quotas. Now, when it comes to people that are driving your buses or flying your airplanes, I want the best person doing this. And I look at people on the street every day. I look at people. I had some crazy road rage maniac this morning, really like basically try to run me off the road. And I came from behind him. Like I had nothing to do in his life prior to the 8-second altercation we had at 85 miles an hour, where the guy was like slamming on his pull in front of me, slamming on his brakes. I tried to go around him. He cut me off. And then he just got off of the next exit and gave me the finger. And I was like, what the fuck was that? But I want the absolute best people doing the jobs. I want there to be stringent requirements. You know, I just want high standards. And when you start incorporating the everyman into this mix, because for whatever reason we're filling quotas or because we've relaxed our standards to let more people do this, there's a lot more instances for this to happen. And I don't know exactly how to deal with that, but I'm telling you, I don't want everybody having a shot at being able to drive a plane because they feel they deserve to.
I don't think that was the case in this one. I think this is something where, like, this guy lied to the company, and like it would have been hard for them to figure this out. Like, not impossible, but it would have been hard for them to realize that he was in treatment for depression and like be able to pull him off of the active pilots for some time and say, hey, you do your mental health thing, and once you're healthy, come back and you'll have a job. But we can't have you flying right now.
Well, I mean, for the same reason, I'd like having regular driver's license tests. I think that's a really good idea. We don't do it. I think companies who have people that
doesn't make any sense, really.
Well, it's obviously the car manufacturers must have an interest. I would assume they would have an interest in not having regular drivers.
The car manufacturers don't really care either way. You know who cares?
The states who are issuing the licenses and making money that way. I don't know who.
The AARP.
You think they're lobbying against the Department of Motor Vehicles?
I can guarantee you they are.
Really?
Because who would regular driver's license testing affect the most?
Presumably senior citizens, yeah. Yeah.
Anytime one of these things gets brought up, like it's always the AARP saying no. And like they'll message their members and say, hey, this is what your politician's thinking about doing. They're going to take away your right to drive. So make sure that you vote against this person next election. Politicians are terrified of the AARP. Why? Because there's a ton of old people in this country, and they fucking vote.
Yeah, old people do vote. Yeah, you were correct.
So, yeah.
All right, so look, let me just get back. So I had Spanish donkey, then I had quartered by horse, and then I had crushing, where they add weight to you until you enter a plea or until you just get crushed. And they're adding usually stones, right? Now, the next one is being stoned. I mean being high.
Oh,
but I mean
death by stoning?
Death by stoning. I've thought about that in the past. I actually listened to a podcast.
Yo, that still happens.
I believe it. It's fucking terrifying. And where I wouldn't want to live if there was a town where if you had cobble streets or something like that, then easy ammo there.
The Middle East, it still happens in some countries.
God.
Often mob justice style, which is not great.
Yeah, well, that is the thing about mob justice.
I mean, on the topic of mob justice, lynching.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty bad way to die, I would say. I would also say pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of times you're definitely not going... Well, is there anywhere where that's legal?
No.
I mean, the U.S. has a bad history of that and racism tied together.
Yeah.
So, all right. What do you want to add next? Because I had the donkey, the horse, the stone, the crushing, and the stone.
Rabies.
Yeah. What's the deal with dying from rabies?
You kind of just go insane. Like, let me look up.
Yeah, you got to share with me some real data here, my friend. This is
Let me look up the
informative to the
symptoms.
this is informative to
Prognosis.
the listener, and
Alright.
and your duty.
Prognosis. Okay, so rabies is almost always fatal after neurological symptoms. Like, so let me see. Cause, etymology, signs, and symptoms. All right.
What I want are the
So,
signs and symptoms and the progression of getting
so
rabies.
the period between infection and actual symptoms is like 1 to 3 months. Like, so if you
Oh
get
God.
bit by something rabid, like you need to get the vaccine within days. And the vaccine is remarkably effective. So like if you get vaccinated, you're pretty much okay. But like, so the initial period are pretty non-specific and just like a fever and headache. But like as it progresses, it causes inflammation of the brain and the meninges, which are like the sheaths on your nerves that like kind of protect the nerves and help send the signals. Um, Symptoms include paralysis, anxiety, insomnia, confusion, agitation, abnormal behavior, paranoia, terror, and hallucinations.
Nice. Terror.
Um,
Terror is yeah. That's wild.
like eventually, like you're just in a delirium, and then you enter a coma, and then you die. But think about like what a rabid animal does. Now imagine being a person that does that.
I don't really know what a rabid animal does. I know they foam at the mouth. So a dog, if a dog might foam at the mouth and be a little growly. A raccoon, maybe.
Yeah. So like there's the aggressiveness. So there's kind of like two forms. There's like the dumb form, which like you when you see an animal that just kind of like is stumbling around looking kind of drunk.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also like the aggressive form where like anything that gets close is just attacked.
Mm. I had so apparently this raccoon must have knocked I have a clamp on the garbage can. Of course, we have to use the county garbage cans out here. The county garbage cans don't have any locking mechanism. When we were in Colorado, they had bear controls on the bear locks on the garbage cans. Here, there was nothing. So I have a clamp that I clamp on there. But somehow this guy got the thing off. Like it was a little
Raccoons are
overfull.
smart.
It was a little overfull, so like he could kind of get at like some of the garbage bags sticking out of the edge and kind of wedge himself in there. But somehow the clamp slid off, finally popped off. Now I saw the thing in the camera, and I have a floodlight outside that's motion sensor, and it went off, which made me look at the camera. And I shot this thing like dead straight between the eyes with a fucking BB gun, and he ran away.
That one probably wasn't rabid. It was just hungry.
No, I don't think. I just think he was a raccoon being a raccoon. Although, look,
so
when I opened the door, what was happening? Hang on, I gotta paint a little picture for you though. Saw the raccoon, and what he was doing is he'd wedge. So he got the lock off he got the clamp off the garbage can. So what he'd do is he'd pop his head into it, and then the lid would pop up on the garbage can, and then he would grab something out, and then it would slam down on him on the garbage can. So each time it slammed, I opened the door a little bit more, and then finally, once the door was open wide enough that I could step out and he wasn't paying attention to me, I just took aim in the little BB gun at him and fired and completely missed.
was it a CO2 powered one?
Yeah, but he stopped and he looked at me and he just kind of looked at me, and then I shot him one more time. I don't know, it was right between the eyes, but the thing fucking jumped like 4 feet up in the air and just ran away.
Yeah, those things hurt, man.
Yeah. I should have pulled out the bow and arrow.
So acute radiation sickness. This is if you get like a mega dose of radiation.
This is why dentists and people that do radiology have to wear that lead apron, right?
That's
So they don't have this
for
regular...
like prolonged exposure to radiation, this is going to be like whatever dose there is of radiation that you get from an X-ray is like one drop of water, whereas what I'm talking about is having an entire pool of water fall on you at the same time.
Okay. And how could that happen? By visiting Chernobyl?
So if you were to go into a certain part of Chernobyl, like if you were to go into the room that has what's called the elephant's foot, which is where like kind of the entire nuclear pile melted down and like formed this kind of radioactive column of metal. If you were in that room for like 30 to 60 seconds, that would probably do it. But the cases I'm talking that I was researching happened at like nuclear power plants or at like Los Alamos during the 40s when they were researching nuclear weapons, where you have radioactive material that all of a sudden like goes critical. So like in one experiment in Los Alamos, they had like this ball of plutonium that's emitting radiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they had these two shells that were neutron reflectors. So if you've got a ball sitting between two shells, like the closer you bring those shells together, the more neutrons are going to get reflected back into the plutonium.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think what they were doing is like one of the guys had like one of the shells was kind of like fixed below the plutonium ball and the other one was loose so that they could move it up and down to see like how much radiation was coming off of the thing as it reflected more or less neutrons. And I think what happened was like it slipped and like went and almost closed off the entire thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so it caused the core to go critical and it released a massive amount of radiation like that. And the guy who was closest to it died in like 9 days.
Wow.
And when it happens, like if you get above a certain dose, so there's some doses where like you're not going to feel good, but if you get the right medical treatment, you might survive. But there's kind of a dose above which there's nothing that can be done. And so like immediately afterwards, you're going to feel really crappy. Like there was one case where the guy got a massive dose and like was knocked out when he came to, like knocked over.
Mm-hmm.
And then like when he came to, like ran outside, like say like feeling like he was burning, and then just like started spasming on the sidewalk. And like when he came, then like after that, like acute reaction happened. Like you basically have your entire white blood cell count is wiped
Mm-hmm.
out. Like just, and
So your body
it
cannot
also
repair itself.
it wipes out all of your gut bacteria too. So like one of the first symptoms that you're gonna have is just like severe intestinal distress. But what like
but at an acute level, yeah, you have no
yeah,
gut bacteria.
and so some like for some of the more minor but fatal cases, like you'll have like these symptoms in like the first couple days that are really really bad, and then there will be a period of like 10 to 15 days where you're actually fine, and it's called the walking ghost phase.
Yeah, where you're
Because
dead, but you're still, you have a death sentence.
yeah, and then everything comes apart, and like it ends with like your skin falling off of you.
Skin falling off. Yeah, yeah. So that made me think of microwaves, which microwave basically cooks you, but it feels like you're being warmed.
Hmm.
When they invented microwaves, wasn't somebody like sunbathing in front of a microwave dish or something like that?
Maybe it makes me think of a way that somebody died where they worked at like a radio station or some like place that transmitted radio waves, which
Yeah.
were on roughly the same frequency as microwaves, and it was somewhere up north, so it was cold. And so what he would do is sometimes he would like there was a gangway that went across the dish, and so there were sometimes he would like bring a chair and just kind of like sit there to warm up.
Yeah, we're talking about the same instance,
Yeah,
and
and
the
then like
guy
one night he
cooked
fell
himself to
asleep.
death. Yeah, and cooked himself to death. Which I just think of like an overly microwaved hot dog, and that sounds fucking terrible.
Yeah.
It's that is
But it
not
would
nice.
take a lot longer. It wouldn't like if you microwave a hot dog for too long, it'll explode. But this would be like the same effect, but like over much. It would take a lot longer for it to happen.
I heard recently the way that microwaves heat food is by causing the water molecules to vibrate.
Yep.
And the water molecules vibrate. Vibration causes the heat. But
Yep.
that's why when you put uh, something that is dry, like a plate, in the microwave, you can microwave it for 10 minutes, and it doesn't get. You can pull the food out, and the plate itself is something you can put your hands on it. However, of course, there is some heat that can transfer, just general heat from the food onto the plate, but the microwaves itself are not heating the plate.
Yeah, if you were to put the dry plate in there with no food on there and you microwave it for a minute or two, the plate's probably still going to be cold.
You could probably put it in there for 5 minutes. The plate's going to be cold. But the plate gets the heat from the hot food, and the hot food gets its heat from the water molecules vibrating inside of that food.
Yep.
All right, what else we got?
Let's see. Do I have any other worse ways to die? I wasn't able to find too much in terms of like the symptoms of this, but like the brain-eating amoeba is pretty bad.
I was thinking of well, hang on that. Tell me about that, because I'm thinking about when you have worms or some type of what's that tapeworm.
Yeah, tape. I don't. It's pretty hard to die from a tapeworm.
It is very hard to die from tapeworm. However, it can work its way through your body and start eating your brain. And in rare
I didn't know that the
instances-
tapeworm could do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure tapeworm can eat your brain. But
I'm not saying that having a tapeworm would be fun. It sounds really terrible.
But tell me about this amoeba. Let me look up the tapeworm.
Well, so you get it from actually like swimming, and like if you inhale some water or whatever, it'll like if you're really unlucky, it'll cross the membrane in your nose and be able to kind of. It's already really close to your brain, so it doesn't have too far to go to get into your brain, and yeah, it just starts eating your brain. And once it does that, there's no treatment. It's kind of like the acute radiation sickness, where like by the time they make the diagnosis that you have this brain-eating amoeba, it's just like you got 2 weeks. How do you want to spend them?
Yeah, that I don't know how I would want to spend them. I want to kind of finish my business.
Here, let me see. I've got the symptoms really quick. Pathogenicity. So, it takes 1 to 9 days for symptoms to appear. Include headache, fever, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, altered mental state, coma, drooping eyelid, blurred vision, and loss of sense of taste. Later, the symptoms will be a stiff neck, confusion, lack of attention, loss of balance, seizures, and hallucinations. Once symptoms begin to appear, death will usually occur within 2 weeks.
So that's very similar to the tapeworm, something that invades your brain, starts eating your brain. But look, I think if I was faced with that death sentence, if it was that fast, I would probably try to get my affairs in order in as quick as possible time, and then I just try to party for like the next couple of weeks.
It's going to get progressively harder to do that just because you are dying.
And then you would want pain medication. I think you have some drinks, then you have some pain medication, and then you just listen to some music or something.
Can we get to the best ways to die? Because I think that.
Okay. We can skip over drowning, and we can skip over starvation. What made me think of this episode actually was an episode on how drowning works, from How Stuff You Should Know. So I learned quite a bit about drowning, and it is not fun. And you can actually drown several days after you inhale water. Did you know that?
Yeah, I don't understand exactly how, but
it basically it breaks your lungs. It ruins it's something like the fascia or something along those lines that are inside of your lungs. The brachial tubes get damaged, and it's bad, man.
Is it something that if you were to go to the doctor or the hospital, they'd be able to save you, or is it one of those ones where once it's broken and you're done?
I'm not sure, but I believe after a certain level of damage, you're done. I think it's something that you can stop at a certain point, but I'm not sure how. I didn't do the article on how to prevent drowning once you've drowned, but we can transition to the best ways to die. I like your number one. So
What's my number
we
one?
don't advocate making yourself die. And
Yeah, don't.
if you're feeling depressed, like call the suicide prevention hotline. If you're feeling depressed, like look, actually, on the real, if you're feeling depressed and you're feeling suicidal, it's not my place to say shit, but I can tell you one thing that with time, things can change beyond your wildest imaginations. So, what you need to do for the time being, if you're feeling suicidal, is call the suicide hotline, talk to some friends, and make some big changes in your life. Even if you don't think change is something that can happen, I promise you, life can change in such a short amount of time. You would be completely surprised.
Don't do
We
something you can't take back.
we tend to overestimate what we can do. How does it work? You overestimate what you can do in a short time and underestimate what you can do in a long time. Is that how that works?
Think so.
Yeah. So you underestimate what you can do in a long time, but then you overestimate what you can do in a short time. Um, but I can tell you that in a relatively short time, your life can look completely different. All right. So what's the best way to die, James?
Well, I'm gonna actually say heroin overdose.
Oh, that was not the number one on your
No,
list.
it's not my number one, but it's not the first on my list, but it is my number one.
Do you know this from experience?
Um, kind of.
I know that you. I know where you're going with this. I shouldn't have asked that question, but explain the mechanism how heroin works and why that might be a great way to die.
Well, I mean, anyone who's taken like an opioid painkiller can talk about how, unless you have a specific allergy to it, how it just makes you feel relaxed and happy.
Which what does it do to your brain?
Well, with a high enough dose, it just depresses brain function to the point where like your autonomic functions shut down.
I'm talking about endorphin release. Doesn't heroin uh, block endorphin receptors? Something along that
I
line.
actually no, 'cause I I don't know exactly like the opioid pathways, but it
How is
doesn't.
there no research? I'm telling you, we were rushed into this episode, my friend. We were rushed in.
We don't need to get into like the we don't need to get into the specifics of how it works. Like ask anybody who was hooked on heroin, or a lot of people who are hooked on heroin will report the following: that after they took heroin, nothing else in life mattered because nothing else in life made them feel as good as heroin.
So, and that's what I tell young kids and teenagers when it comes to doing drugs. If somebody tells you try this drug, you will like it. The answer is no, thank you. I'm aware that I will like it, but no,
Yeah.
thank you.
How
That's how
good are
drugs work.
drugs? Drugs are
Great.
so good they
Drugs are
will
great.
ruin your life.
Drugs are great. Drugs will become your life because there is nothing better than drugs on the face of this earth. Because the way that drugs work is they interact with your brain in a way that
Nothing else can.
but nothing else matters. Yeah, it's that's the thing about drugs. So
Well, they're
don't
just
do
pressing a button that can't be pressed any other way.
yeah,
And
and
that's why they're
buttons
terrifying.
and blocking other buttons.
Yeah. Like my only experience with quote unquote heroin was when I got fentanyl in the hospital for my broken arm.
Hmm.
And I remember being woken up to two hospital residents torquing on my arm trying to get it lined up again, and that hurt pretty bad, but it also woke me up. And then I was just kind of laying there with my arm in a cast in just like this fentanyl haze, and I couldn't have been happier.
Hold both your forearms up. I'm looking pretty
Super white.
straight there. Yeah, they're looking really fucking pale, dude. I
Yeah,
thought I had a little tan, but not in this light. But compared to your arms, dude, you look like Casper. And I
yeah.
know you get probably a lot more sun than I do, at least at the
No, I don't. Like
yeah,
I
all
do a
right.
lot of my running and biking at night these days because it lines up with my schedule better. But anyways, heroin overdose, like you're the happiest you've ever been, and then you die.
It, that's how it works. And then you got carbon monoxide poisoning on here, basically
So
because you just fall asleep.
yeah, I think it depends on how you do it. Because like, if you do it the wrong way, then like you're
It's a lot
kind
of
of gasping for air.
yeah.
But if it's if you do it while you're falling asleep, this is just why like so many people try and kill themselves by just like parking their car in the garage, turning it on, and going to sleep.
Yeah, don't do that's a waste
No,
of
like
gas. It's a waste of gas, assholes. All right, gas is really expensive. And you know what? If you want to try that in an electric car, be my guest.
yeah, the problem with the electric car is that you just get bored to death.
Well, you probably have an iPad as your fucking center console. Bullshit.
Yeah.
You're gonna surf some fucking Instagram in your Tesla.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, people, don't kill yourselves. This is just like, if you're going to have to die,
We're
these are
adding
probably
this
the better ways
segment.
to
We're
do
adding
it.
this segment because we just talked about sitting on a fucking wedge and being torn in half.
Yeah.
So we need to add some levity. So can I read your next line?
Just keep going, man.
The trying to beat, because it reads it says, James notes here read trying to beat Evel Knievel's jumping record 14 buses intercourse.
No, that's a comma. Like, I'm just saying, like, if you're gonna die, like, maybe do it doing something awesome. Like,
I always
trying
thought that would be like, I always assumed that when I died it would be like kind of in a fury of kind of some type of ball of fire type event, and I was cool with that. I don't try to invite it, but
Right, so, like,
I think it's better than just like a boring way to die.
right. I've never ridden a motorcycle before. I'm gonna try and jump 15 buses.
If you can get into gear, fucking go for it.
Yeah, but, like, that's just I wanted to come up with a specific example for a general idea of, like, just do something batshit crazy, man.
Dude,
Don't harm anybody else, but, like,
the last time we talked, I was complaining to you about having to drive like fucking I've spent so much time on the road in the last week and so much time in the office. I was complaining to James about having to drive like 3.5 hours in monsoon rain conditions on the fucking motorcycle coming from a funeral. It doesn't get much more fucking dim than that shit.
Yo, it makes me think of a line from a stand-up comedian. I can't remember who it was. But he was complaining about old people driving slow. Like, I don't understand why old people drive slow. Like, they've already lived most of their life. Like, why aren't they the fastest drivers out there? What do they care?
What are they gonna lose?
Yeah, he's like, like when I'm 80, I'm buying the fastest car I can afford. And just like imagine that, like, dude, I'm so bummed my grandmother died. Well, what happened?
What happened?
She flipped her vet.
She was doing a $1.10.
Yeah.
Somebody pulled out in front of her. But yeah, that's the thing is these days, anybody you talk to, their kind of party message. It used to be like "Have a good one." Now it's "Be safe." I don't really like that "Be safe." I don't know what you would call it, but I don't like the phrase. It's a very new one where everybody is wishing each other caution in the wind, right? Like it's not. I don't think it's good for anybody. Be safe. Take no risks. I think the riskiest risk is not taking risks, man.
Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Including moderation, yeah. You can't always be super moderate, and the fucking living in the abundance of caution is a fucking boring ass way to live.
Well, when I was a teacher, one of the people that I worked with had a cool like closing phrase. He would always say to anybody, like as his goodbye, was "Keep your head down."
Keep your head down. And this was who? This was a student, and you were the teacher?
This is a fellow teacher. He was a former Navy guy.
That's the thing about being a teacher is you can actually have a catchphrase, right? Because you get recycled new people every year. You have some influence on people, and they just kind of cycle in, cycle out.
This guy had the cakest job in the entire school. He was the
job?
ISS supervisor. In-school suspension supervisor.
That's
so, like,
the whole job?
Yeah, you have to have someone to watch the kids.
Bro, you're just dealing with the derelicts.
Yeah, but you're right. But like the rules of ISS were, you don't get to talk, you don't get to do anything. So he just sat in a room where kids had to be silent for like 7 hours straight, and like he would walk them to like the cafeteria so they could get their lunch.
Because in-school suspension is all day. I was thinking detention. There's in-school suspension and there's out-of-school suspension.
Yeah, out-of-school suspension never really seemed like a punishment to me.
No, I agree.
But in-school suspension, so he would just sit in this room and like read a book for 7 hours straight and just make sure that like the kids didn't talk.
We are gonna have to drop our Instagram stream. We'll stay live on TikTok. We'll stay live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch. So if you're on, it's over, and just cue the music, and we'll continue the conversation for a little bit until we get bored or I drink too much. Music. There's the music. All right, there goes our outro music.
But yeah, man, that guy's job was like at the time I was like that would be so sweet. Like you just get to chill in a room because like I would bring that like a couple times I had to do his job for him when he called out sick, and so I just brought in a laptop and played chess. Because as long as my laptop was on silent, it didn't matter.
Dude, I would want to interact with the students. I mean, the thing is, there's a certain amount.
No, I'm sure it would have gotten old after a couple weeks.
It is so cool right now to be compliant. It is so cool right now to wear the mask. It is so cool right now to tell other people to comply. I know you are way more liberal than I am, and you're like, well, no, it's the better thing to do. But I'm telling you, as a kid, you would not have been the kid wearing the mask.
Oh, no. As a kid, I would have been the one fighting it every single day.
Yeah, and you would have been fighting on some logic of your own, just like, look, I mean, I'm telling you one thing about fucking masks. They don't do shit unless it's a good mask. And I'm all for wearing a good mask. No, the science, all the mask studies show that they are like, the best mask study shows like 14% efficacy. In most of the masks, the cloth masks don't do shit, and then the paper masks that people are wearing. Look, I'm going to tell you something. If I was like scrubbing asbestos, I would not wear any of the masks that I see people wearing on the street. I would wear an N95
wearing like an industrial rebreather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, with the rebreather on it. I would not be wearing these fucking paper masks. And that's how I can tell you that, like, if you can smell farts through the mask, it doesn't work. That's the rule.
I don't know. Fart particles are a little bit smaller than virus
corona
particles.
I disagree with you completely. I disagree with you completely. We got to talk about a couple more great ways to die, actually, and it has nothing to do with fart. So dysentery. We didn't touch on dysentery as a bad way to die.
Dysentery is terrible. That's not a good way to die.
A lot of people died in the Oregon Trail via dysentery. And that didn't even top our list. Yet all of us have died on the Oregon Trail via dysentery.
Yeah, dysentery is pretty bad. Like,
if you're over 30 years old, at least.
My roommate made this point because, like, so
after he blew up the bathroom,
he says he doesn't want to die like Elvis, and it's just like he doesn't want to die on the toilet. Now, there's a difference between like an embarrassing death and like a painful death.
No, you know that Elvis was eating like this garlic bread, peanut butter jelly sandwich type thing.
Yeah.
You familiar with that?
It was like peanut butter and pickles or something.
It was my understanding is that it was a buttered bread with peanut butter and jelly. What you know what it's called? Name of sandwich, Elvis?
Peanut butter, banana, and bacon, maybe?
Yeah, it had bacon on it, I think. Yeah, that sounds... So, either way... So, my thing is actually Elvis had some issue going on. You know how they said Robin Williams had Lewy body dementia? Oh. You familiar with Lewy body dementia?
I remember reading about it, but I don't remember the details.
Dude, it is scary shit. I will tell you exactly what it is. So Lewy body dementia is how Robin Williams died. What is Lewy body dementia? A disease associated with abnormal deposits of protein called alpha-synuclein in the brain. These deposits are called Lewy bodies, and affect chemicals in the brain, where in turn can lead to problems with thinking, movement, behavior. What are the first signs of Lewy body dementia? Hallucinations, delusions of reality, like Alzheimer's. Cognitive fluctuations, changes in movement, behavioral shifts, sleep problems. 7 stages. Stage 1, no cognitive decline. Stage 2, mild cognitive decline. 3, mild cognitive decline. 4, moderate. Okay, it's just, and then it goes severe and then very severe. All right, that's a shit list. What happens at the end of Lewy body dementia? Muscle weaknesses affecting swallowing ability can lead to aspirated food or liquid, resulting in pneumonia or death in advanced dementia. Problems with aspiration, but basically, you just fucking go. It's similar to rabies. You just go mad.
Really?
Yeah. So what happened was people who are close to Robin Williams said like he locked himself in the closet. He called them like 35 times in 10 minutes, like shit like that, and then he hung himself. Which my thinking is the hanging of yourself in that moment is your last bit of sanity making that decision, right? Like, really a shame, man. Really a shame.
Yeah. Well, with Elvis, I'm pretty. Like, was it an aneurysm that he died from?
I think so.
Yeah, but my roommate was just like, I don't ever want to die. Like, I don't want to be found on the toilet. Like, that's just an embarrassing position to be found in as your death.
We had this alcoholic agent. I don't think I've ever told you this story. We had this agent who was like a college dude. He was like a frat type dude. Came from some means. He was hardcore right leaning. He used to go to this Irish bar. We thought they were like the KKK or something in this Irish bar. We don't know what the fuck they were doing. We never went to their meetings. But he was, in terms of his social media presence, pretty right wing. Either way, heavy ass drinker. You go out with this guy, you wouldn't see him for 3 days afterwards. We don't know where the fuck he went. So he told us he had cooled with drinking. Now, in our old real estate office, we had drinks a lot of the time. Now, the vast majority of the time, nobody would get crazy drunk. Now, there was a few outlying events, but like the people were respectable enough to compose themselves, go home, sleep it off, and come in the next day, maybe a couple hours late. So this was a guy that disappeared for 3 days after drinking, but it was none of our business. We were celebrating something, like a big deal. And we were sitting in one of the rooms with some big conference tables, relaxing. We had a few bottles of champagne, a couple bottles of wine. And there was 8 of us, maybe. So guy comes in, says, "Hey, guys, how's it going? Can I get a little of this?" And he didn't ask me. I wasn't the one celebrating. It was my company, but I was just kind of there celebrating with the people celebrating. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he goes, "No, it's all right. I'm taking it slow." And I assume he's talking about he never admitted he had a problem, but he said, "I'm taking it slow." So we gave him a little glass of wine, and we're not in my office. We're in kind of a corner office conference room type situation. So the guy comes back, and we only gave him half a cup of wine. The guy comes back 35 minutes later. We're still all hanging out. Nobody else in the office. And he goes, "Hey, can I get a little more? I'm in the other room working." He has another half glass of wine. We sent him off. He came back maybe a half hour after that. Another glass of wine. You could tell we were a little rambunctious, but we're in the office. So then that guy disappears. Like, all right, he went home. Now, we all were about to leave the office, so we're closing up. We're putting our empty bottles in the garbage can. We notice all the lights are on the rest of the office. This guy at his desk, his cell phone was still there. All the shit was still there. His computer was on. And we didn't know where he went. We walked around the office, couldn't find him. I walked into the office. This guy had thrown up in the bathroom and passed out on the floor. And he had his pants around his ankles. It was a rough scene. So there's one thing to die on. I didn't know what the fuck was wrong with him. I thought he fell and slipped and hit his head. I didn't realize he was drunk. He had 3 third glasses of wine. Come to find out,
he must have been drinking on hiding it.
Yeah, he was hiding. Yeah, he was drinking something else, and he drank a bottle of whiskey that night, and then passed out in the bathroom floor in an office, which is a really shitty situation. But it was what it was. But yeah, dying on the toilet, even worse. At least this guy almost died in the floor of the bathroom. Not endorsed by us, personal. It's like, what do you do if you have somebody that works for your company and they're doing drugs that you don't know about?
Well, if you don't know about it, you can't do anything.
Exactly. I actually fired the guy once, and somehow he got rehired.
Well, it makes me think of your time in South Carolina when you had a coworker whose face was on the front page of the Post and Courier, like passed out on the sidewalk. Do you remember this?
I do. Yeah, I don't think his name was tied to that article, was it?
No, but
Just how he
he
kept his job.
no. I think he actually got fired because even though it wasn't like his name wasn't on there, like the company recognized his face and they're like, yeah, we can't keep you. Because I remember he was in the group of friends that you had, but he didn't actually work for your company.
Oh, yeah. So
And like, how did he know everybody? Because he used to work there. Why did he used to work there and not work there anymore? The picture on the front page of the newspaper.
Yeah, well,
Because there was a headline of like, has King Street drinking like gotten too like out of control? And here's him.
So, but that's the thing is, I think the cops have this duty to pick people up at the end of the night, right? Or even in the middle of the night. Like, if people are not obeying the rules, people are sleeping on the streets. People are. It's one. So here's something about New York City and a lot of public places in the U.S. There's no benches. There's no seats because the homeless people take them over. But it's one thing if like you're in a park and there's somebody who's nodded off because they're taking in the sun, relaxing on their work from break, on their break from work, and you just kind of tap them. They go, "Oh, sorry, I was just, I'm on my break. What time is it? Let me get back to work." And there's another thing if they're like high on fucking drugs.
Yeah, it's just like if you've got someone who's sunbathing out in the park and they happen to fall asleep while they're sunbathing, no cop's going to be arresting them.
No, but if somebody smells like fucking shit and piss and they're on drugs and they're surrounded by syringes and you tap them and they don't wake up, that person goes to jail. It doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning or it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And also, if that person is hammered from leaving the bar and they don't wake up, that's public intoxication. You go to jail. But the problem is right now the police are too worried to even touch these people.
Well,
and then we had an issue where last week my girlfriend was on the train into the city, and there was a crazy person harassing the people on the train. And because it was the last stop into the city, so they weren't checking tickets because you have to pass a turnstile to get in. You got to show your ticket at that turnstile, so they don't check tickets on the train. The person was going crazy on the train, harassing the customers on the train. And she was like, fuck, this guy's going to like beat people up, maybe beat me up. I'm in the second row. And nobody did shit. And yet you still had to pay a $15 ticket, $14.75 ticket to get into Manhattan. Like, how do you justify that?
You don't.
And yet like somebody who doesn't have a ticket because their ticket won't load on their phone because you're underground for that time. They call the cops on. Or if you have an open soda on the train, or back when you didn't have a mask on the train, they would call the cops. But yet this person can be on the train.
You're not allowed to have a drink on the train?
Well, when there was mask policy, they were strictly prohibiting anything at all. You couldn't have Skittles because you would be opening your mask. They were really, really serious in New Jersey. Long Island Railroad, where the laws were actually stricter, they just weren't enforced, which is really weird. I went from Long Island Railroad into Penn Station, then Penn Station onto New Jersey Transit, and it was like a different world. New Jersey Transit was like crazy, like very, enforcing masks and everything, and the next place wasn't. So I don't know how we strayed from best ways to die. Is there another best way to die that you want to add?
Ground zero at a nuclear explosion.
You think it's the best way to die? If you don't see it coming.
Yeah, it's just instant. It's just in a flash, and you just disappear. Now, like, if you're far enough away that, like, you don't die immediately, it's going to suck really hard. But if you're within, like, the half-mile radius or whatever, where everything's just vaporized, that's not bad.
Yeah, as long as it's a terror before, right? Just like when we talked about the trains, it's the terror before. It's not the actual incident, which is why I think, some people just go wild and other people find peace. I've always been somebody to find peace. I don't know about you, but
That's why I like to fly hungover. Because
I've never heard
if
of
you're
that airline.
hungover enough,
I've never heard of that airline hungover. I usually fly JetBlue.
oh yeah, and like you hit a little bit of turbulence or whatever. If you're hungover, you're just like, take it down. My head hurts anyways. Just make sure to hit something hard. I don't want to be walking away from this one. I don't want to be like limping away from the crash site.
Dude, there's been a lot of talk in the last few years about limiting drinking on airlines. I hate flying, and I fly way better after a few drinks, and being able to have a couple of drinks in the plane I like.
Well, I think the issue is, especially after Corona, like when people started flying more, like you have to have seen the videos of all these people just losing their minds on airplanes.
Dude, well, I'm curious your perspective on that, and even what in particular you're talking about. So, people are losing their mind in what way?
Like treating other people on the plane, be it stewardesses or like flight attendants or like other passengers, like just people not treating people like people. And
Okay, what are they losing their mind about?
well, sometimes it's the masks, but there's also been cases where like people have just been like drunk and like just bothersome in general to people.
I thought you left the alcohol actually out of your statement.
No.
But,
There's like alcohol is a factor in a lot of these.
but I would say that the mask actually in both directions. The person wearing the mask demanding that the people around them wear a mask, and then the people not wearing a mask saying it doesn't matter. All
I
right,
mean,
now
my whole thing is like the times that I've flown since Corona or whatever, my whole opinion is if I have to wear a mask, it's not particularly pleasant. So everybody else should have to wear a mask because if I'm suffering, you must suffer too.
okay, but that's not a rational statement or logic.
I'm
Now,
just saying, like, I'm not going to be the one to change the rules. So, like, if I have to play by the rules, then everybody else does too.
This is newer for you as you become more liberal. All right. Now, my thing is, I don't want to have an argument with anybody, and I also want to appear relatively respectful. All right. Now, when it comes to wearing the mask, we have this co-op unit where the building requires us to wear masks. I put the mask on. I get in the elevator, walk into the apartment, take it off. Now, I don't carefully fit the mask around my nose and do the whole shit. When it comes to the plane, I usually just put the mask on the most comfortable way and then just order as much food and drink as possible so I can take it off. But my thinking is that if you're on the plane and you've been sitting there for 42 minutes and then you can take your mask off for the next 19 minutes to eat some pretzels and have a Diet Coke, and then you got to put your mask on, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that.
I mean,
I think you raise an interesting point, which is like,
the mask never mattered to begin with. We were just wearing it out of respect and out of kind of reverence for like the more liberal side of things.
I think the question is like, do the masks help if you allow people to take them off for some amount of time? And
first of all, the masks don't help that much, and then second of all, do they help any more if people take them on and put them off?
Well, I think by any stretch of logic, you would have to say that taking the masks off is going to reduce the efficacy.
Yeah, and then we're letting people take them off. Another thing that I realized over the last couple of weeks, we haven't talked about this in the podcast, is that a lot of the lockdowns and the shutdowns and the mask mandates were demanded by the media, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have done anything, but a lot of it was demanded by the media and by people saying, "Hey, look at China. What they're doing is stopping coronavirus, and that's what we need to be doing. And look at China, and that's the solution because it works. You can see the stats coming out of China. Yet we are trusting the statistics coming out of a communist regime that is notorious for making up statistics and lying.
Well, I think when it comes to the lockdowns, like, if, let's say, a coronavirus infection lasts for 2 weeks before it's no longer infectious, right? And I'm sure that the numbers are slightly different, but I'm probably pretty close, right?
Okay.
So,
Well, that was originally what we thought. We're going to shut down for 2 weeks, and then everybody who's going to get sick is going to. They're like, well, actually, it might take 10 to 14 days to implement itself, so we're going to wait another 2 weeks, and then we'll be good. And then we got the 28 days. 28 days later, we're good.
I'm not
also
saying,
a zombie movie, by the way.
I'm not saying that the way we did it was correct. I'm explaining the theory.
You're explaining the rationale that we used.
The theory is, if this thing's only infectious for 2 weeks, if everybody locks down for 2 weeks and nobody goes anywhere and nobody's exposed to anybody besides the people that are in their own house, then the virus will have nowhere to go, and it will immediately fizzle out because it just can't transmit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those ones where I think unless you execute it exactly right with perfect precision, then
as was enforced by the military in China.
Yeah, then it won't work. And so what we did in this country was half-ass our way in, half-ass our way through, and half-ass our way out. And
that's exactly what happened, based off of intel coming from China. So we half-assed our way and half-assed intel. So I mean, theoretically, if we didn't half-ass it, it would have worked. But also the intel we had was fucking half-assed anyway, because it comes from a communist regime that's known for fucking lying.
And I'm sure that there's going to be studies done on the lockdowns and their effectiveness, and both how they were effective by implementation and whether their implementation itself was effective. And I'm going to be really interested to see what they come out with, and that'll probably take a little while longer for them to even be able to come up with some preliminary conclusions. But it's entirely possible that the way we did the lockdowns in this country really did fuck all. But you also have to say, given the information that we had at the time, what was the best decision? And I can't say that the lockdowns were. I don't know.
But we were also really late on doing anything.
Well,
we had Trump saying, it's just going to disappear.
So if we had acted faster, if we had better testing to have an idea as to where things were,
we didn't implement testing almost until a year afterwards.
Well,
and now the testing places, there's fucking testing places on every block in Manhattan.
Well,
and
if you don't
they're
test
they're waving places down. They're waving people down the way the tax agencies wave people down with fucking blow up dolls and shit like that, and mascots in the street, because now they have. Now they have to generate that business for themselves.
Well,
if we had the testing,
if you don't test these people, if we don't test these people, then we just don't have coronavirus.
Well, I think the actual phrase was, cases are going up because testing is going up. Something along those lines, which clearly is the case, right? That's. I mean, how would it not? Right?
Yeah.
We've noticed speeding seems to be going up because now we have police out there with speed cameras. Well, the cases were always there, but also this was a test for the United States and the rest of the world to see how we deal with pandemics. The issue was that they oversold this pandemic from the get-go. And a lot of it was to make Trump look like shit and to get him out of office. And what happened was...
Well, Trump did a good job on that point on his own.
On his own, sure. But they put all their eggs in the fucking coronavirus basket to get Trump out.
And it worked.
And it worked, but then we're still dealing with a shit that is bullshit 2 years later, where there's one kid in a high school or a middle school that gets coronavirus, the fucking 700 student school shuts down. Or now we have parents trying to get their fucking 3-year-olds vaccinated for coronavirus. And, the information's out.
And
now.
what's wrong with getting a 3-year-old vaccinated?
Because the vaccines don't do that much, and the 3-year-olds weren't at risk. There was 9 3-year-olds. There was 9 people in the United States under the age of 12 that died from coronavirus. So,
yeah, but what's the harm of having a 3-year-old vaccinated?
Well,
right.
But there's more, vaccines. But we're not vaccinating for anything, right?
Well, we vaccinate 3-year-olds for all sorts of shit.
Oh god.
By the time you're 3, you've probably had like 2 or 3 courses of vaccines for like measles, mumps, rubella, smallpox. Like some vaccines, I'm pretty sure they give to like babies that are like 12 or 14 months. I'm not entirely sure because it's not like I'm gonna have a kid, but
also those vaccines eradicate that virus in your system. This doesn't eradicate.
No, they don't eradicate the virus in your system. You don't have the virus, and the vaccines give you immunity.
They give you full immunity to them. Yeah, that's what I mean. This doesn't give you full immunity.
No, but if it is harmless and it gives some kind of partial immunity or resistance, then why not do it?
For the same reason I don't drive 50 miles an hour in a 55.
Or that is harmless. That is harmful.
I don't drive 55 in a 55.
Well, that's also harmful.
I weigh the risk on my own.
Like, I watched a video of people driving in Atlanta, and they said the speed limit on this highway is 55. And so they formed a 4-car, like it was 4 lanes, so they got 4 cars to drive 55, and you just watch the traffic back up. And so the point of the video was to show that like the speed limit was set artificially low, and that it's unsafe to drive the speed limit on these roads because everyone's driving faster. Therefore, the speed limit should be higher.
Much agreed. Should we kill the stream?
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah, user interaction is dropping off a little bit.
All right, so we're going to thank you guys for joining us. James, you want to stick around for a couple of minutes? We'll finish the conversation, and we want to thank you guys for the topic has morphed into coronavirus, and we apologize for that because we'd like to keep our content very much in line with the title of the episode. But if you made it this far, you ought to subscribe, and you ought to harass the fuck out of us in the comments for losing track of where we were going. So thank you guys for making it this far. We'll see you on the next podcast, and adios.
All right, that was our episode on worst ways to die. Tune in for the next episode. I think you're going to like that. And if you're on a roll, you've seen a few of these episodes, make sure you subscribe. SipTalk is on every audio podcast platform, from Spotify to Apple Music to Anchor. And you can watch on YouTube. So we post-produce, we throw them on YouTube, and we jazz them up a little bit. So hopefully you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. On that note, see you guys next time. Thanks for coming.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.